Here's our starting point. When we get this bow to brace height initially, we go ahead and brace it and leave it this way for a half hour. We can do that a couple of times if that's how you would like to approach it. You can leave it for an hour. You could leave it overnight for all that matters. The bow is going to learn how to bend in this state. The reason that I keep it to a half hour or so is so that I don't come back to it and have anything really weird happen as far as like limb shape take form, and then I'm stuck with it later on down the line. So every time we exercise this bow and it takes a change, it's going to take us a commensurate amount of exercising and time with it to register the next change. So really what we're looking to do is register these changes as quickly as possible so that we can move on to the next stage of tillering. All right, so we do not want to get bogged down into drawing this thing 100 times at 24 inches, because you're going to have to draw it 100 times at 25 and 26, etc., to get to register those changes that you're making on the bow limbs. Tillering is such a complicated thing to explain, and that's why I try to keep the process that I use as regimented as possible. Now, a lot of tillering comes down to your ability to recognize the bend in the limbs of your bow, right? We have different tools that can help us with this, like a tillering gizmo, you know, what Dean Torges would call our critical eye, and etc. But at this stage of the game, I'm really trying to pay attention to making sure that the limbs themselves are bending evenly to start with. So I'm pulled to about 12 inches down the tillering stick here, and I've had it on the tillering tree a couple times too, and done a few little removals, and I'm trying to, we want to get a good look down this limb at the glue line between the bamboo and the ipe, right? And you can see on the long view there, the glue line tends to bend evenly right through here and then kind of land out straight out here, which is a good scenario. All right. On this other limb, which is a little easier to see in the light as it turns out, is bending almost evenly along its length all the way down to the tip, if you can see that. So they're not bending quite the same out there in the last third of the limb. Okay, this one being a little more straight, and the opposite one taking more of a bend all the way out to the tip. Now, what we're going to need to do is take off material right in association really with this node right here. This is kind of where that's at. See if I can get this a little more clear again, right? Whereas this one, we need to take material off kind of at this node here to kind of loosen, or to get a little more bend to occur here and lighten up what's going on at the very tip. So you can see I've got a little bit of a stiff spot right where that node is. So we're basically removing material on both limbs, like in the same place, but for different reasons, right? Over here to kind of weaken this to get a little more bend into the extremity, and over here kind of weaken this to take some of the stress off the extremity. Kind of a contradiction, but if you think about it, I mean, if we encourage more bend right where those nodes are on each side, it's going to correct the malady that is occurring beyond that piece of the nodes. So, all right, before we go to taking any major removals off on this bow, or as we're getting ready to start the tillering process, we just want to get through and smooth out any kind of pre-existing mill marks you know, so that we can make sure that as we start getting to work with our scraper, we're going to take off smooth ribbons of removal on this belly wood. All right, what I am doing here, guys, is kind of marking out my offending areas that I need to take a little bit of wood off to get the tiller correct. And especially on this limb down here, this is the one that kind of feels like it's doing a little bit of a whip tiller. I want to make sure I don't ever remove any material beyond this mark. The way I go about doing this is I take about 25 or between 20 and 30 wipes along the flat edge of the limb to see if I can't affect that bend. And if that doesn't get me the desired outcome, I will string it back up and then take another 20 wipes off, etc. So very, very meticulous in the way that we approach this, right? And very regimented. It keeps you from removing too much at one time. It keeps you from getting carried away on one limb versus the other. It just keeps everything very well organized in terms of our approach to, it's a systematic approach to tiller. All right, guys, when it comes to removing material, it's important to kind of feather those removals into existence. So we know that we want to remove wood along this entire length that I have marked off here in the white pencil, but we don't want to necessarily go directly from here to here every time, or we're going to end up with problems right at our transitions where you take a steep bump, right? We want to feather this in, and we want to make sure that we're getting good removal across the meat of this reduction. So a practice that I've gotten into is to take half the wipes from like the 3/4 mark out, and then the other half of the wipes from 3/4 mark out the other direction. And it kind of concentrates the removal here, feathers it out to here, and then just a little bit beyond. Right? 1, 2. So there's 15 removals. And 15 that direction as well. And I always come back with the file just to kind of take any washboarding or anything else that occurs as a result of the use of the scraper. So I'll just smooth everything out, very lightly working the file in that removal area. As we go on about doing these removals, it's important that we keep certain guideposts in mind, or that we keep a check on certain areas of the bow. One of those specific measures, I'm going to call it a measure, would be the measure between the fades and the string. Right? We do not want this bow getting all out of whack with one limb bending so much further than the other one that we end up, you know, out of whack, and you can measure that at the grip. So here's how I'm going to do this. Right out of the fade into the string, this side right here is bending at 6 7/8 of an inch. This side right here is bending at 6 7/8 of an inch. So what we have, and actually it's just a whisper less than 6 7/8 here, which kind of makes sense because this is where we've been doing some removal to try and get this particular limb to bend just a little bit more. Now, why I am kind of putting a rest to that activity right now is that I have gone through now on 3 occasions, taken, you know, between 30 and 40 removals right here 3 times. I've only done the other side once, and it is remaining stiff, and I don't want to continue removing down here and then find out later on in the later stages of tillering that we have removed too much wood, right? So we're only pulling on the tree out there to about 18 inches. I think I've had it to 20 inches a few times, just to kind of make sure that this is getting all the bend that it needs to register the change. However, having taken 60 wipes with the card scraper down here and having minimal change show up makes me a little skeptical that it's actually registering. And I'm sure that as we move down the tillering tree there and start drawing to longer and longer lengths, this is going to come into compliance. So I'm going to, for the time being, since we are pretty much even in all other aspects of this tiller, I'm going to let this develop as we move along the tillering process. So, all right, so we're going to start pulling on this right quick, just kind of get a feel for how we're bending. Scale is locked. See, everything seems to be bending pretty well. Now, as I mentioned, I'd had it pulled to 20 inches a couple times. Whoop. As I was saying, I've had it pulled to 20 inches a couple times, or down into that neighborhood. And at 20 inches here, it's pulling right at 40 pounds, 20-inch mark. So we're wanting this to come in there in that 45 to 50 pound range. We're coming close to our mark at the 20-inch range. So we've got a little bit of weight removal to do on this bow, which is kind of a good thing in some ways, since we are still trying to work out getting the bend just right out in here. As part of the weight removal, we can have a little bit of effect on that tiller as well. What I'm going to do is kind of concentrate removal on the edges of the limbs on both of them, and we're going to take probably 40 wipes from fade to about within the last 6 inches of the limb tips out here. We don't want to go all the way to the tips because we want to preserve as much strength out there at the extreme ends of the tips as possible. All right, guys, so as we're taking off the wipes from our belly here to take down the weight, you'll find it just kind of comes as a natural course. And I can't count and talk at the same time, so I'm just going to say it. As you're taking off your edges, that it starts to roll over and blend into the belly of the bow, the top of the belly. All right, so we are taking off on these edges, but as they start creating these peaks, we want to take those peaks out as well. And you begin to get this sort of convexed surface across the surface of your belly. So it's just kind of crowned right here, as opposed to being faceted at this point, because we are drawing just about to our draw weight at 20 inches. At last check, I took some weight off. It was drawing to 42 pounds at 22 inches. So we are getting very close to finished here. If we were to draw it out to 45, it'd probably be 23 inches of draw, which gives us 5 inches yet to go. And we know that as we draw on down the line on that tillering tree, that it starts to compress as we move along the way. So even though we may pick up, a certain amount of weight between the 23 mark and the 28 mark over those 5 pounds, it's not guaranteed that it's going to be 15 pounds or like 3 pounds of draw weight, or even 2 pounds of draw, or in that neighborhood, right? So You can't count on that, and that's why you always draw to a specific weight and kind of see where you're at in terms of length. All right, guys, this seems to be pulling pretty evenly down to the 22-inch mark. At 22 inches, it's actually pulling about 44 pounds. So we're near our finished weight at the 22-inch mark right now. So still chasing weight, but since we're 22 inches along, and we're going to be doing a lot of weight reduction from here to full draw, we want to make sure that we have all of our minor tillering issues handled. And so I'm going to be using a tillering gizmo here, and the pencil that I've got in here is probably sticking out just maybe 1/8 of an inch, just 1/8. And my intent is to try and get as little bit of pencil line on there as possible. I may even run it down just a little bit lower so that it only picks up the real blatant flat spots that we can go ahead and tiller out. Now I'm using a regular pencil, so I'm gonna have to look at it in the light and then go back and augment that with some white colored pencil. But you know, we're just gonna run the lengths of these limbs with the tillering gizmo so that we can get a feel for where we need to do additional removals. Right, so just up and down these limbs like such. All right. And then take a look on our belly. All right, so here's what I've got. If I come back after it with white pencil, it starts right here and continues on out to the tip. So if we're bending quite a bit right here, and this is where it starts to even out on that particular one. On this one, we're bending really well in through here, and it picks up at this point and on out to the tip. Now, if we're paying pretty close attention there, you'll see that we're getting about to mid limb here, where we're not quite making that much distance on this side over here. So we are at the 9.5 inch mark there, at the 12.5 inch mark on what would be the lower limb. So we need to remove material out in here on this particular limb to get it to match up to what's going on this side of the bow. I've taken a few days off from tillering on this particular project, so getting caught back up to where we left off. In all kinds of instances, your tillering will span the course of perhaps more than just one day. So getting caught up again, taking a couple quick measures here. I'm showing 7 inches gap between the fade and the string on that side. I'm showing 7 inches on that one as well. So we're running pretty well even in terms of strain on the limbs. I went ahead and did a removal there where the tillering gizmo told me that I should take off wood. Went out to the tillering tree and pulled on this bow for 20 or 30 pulls, and to at least 23 inches, and on several occasions to 24. So every time you make any kind of change or adjustment on your tiller. So you remove any material anywhere along the length of your limbs. You want to pull that bow now to register that change, and generally speaking, you need to pull it an additional, right up to, if not just a little bit more than what it was pulling before. And that is how you get that compression to register on the belly, because it is moving into new territory, so to speak. All right, been working on the tiller of this bow now for about 4 or 5 different sessions of removing belly wood and then exercising it out there on the tillering tree. We are finally at about 48 pounds at 26-inch draw. All right, I am at about just over 6 3/4 gap on what would be my upper limb, and just under 6 3/4 on the lower. We're darn near equal here. We take a look at the tiller on this guy. Looking really pretty good. Guys, at one point while I was doing the tillering, I did go back and just barely take some material off of both sides of both limbs, just to narrow them just ever so slightly. It got me that last 5 pounds that I needed. From there, it was removal along the belly. Now, of course, you can take weight off both ways. At this point, guys, we're doing everything off the belly of this bow. So we're not going to be working on the sides any longer. What we're doing. When you're done taking the rind off the back of your bamboo, this is what it should look like. Just a real nice golden glow on there, with just these little humps there where the nodes resided before. So, and you can definitely feel them. So they're not gone by any means, but you know, taken down enough such that you don't have to worry about any sharp edges raising splinters. Something else to be aware of. Here I'm going to get these tips evened up on this board here, and you'll see that let's see here, let's see if I can't widen out. So the tips are on the front of that board right there, and we're still sitting, I don't know, we got a little bit of, here's our setback still in this bow. So tillered at this point to 26 inches, a little over 45 pounds. I think it came in at like 48 pounds, 26 inches. And now we just work out the last couple inches of draw, maintain that weight as best we can, and shoot it in. So we took this bow back out to the tillering tree and ran it down the tree to 26 inches as it was before. Still just below 50 pounds there. I want to say it was like at 48 pounds, maybe just a little bit less. Continued pulling it down the tree, pulling further and further, because the bend of the limbs was well in compliance as I moved along. Really, as I'd stated, when we get down to just the last couple inches of draw, you're pretty much home. The last pieces are not that big of a deal. So at 27 inches, it was pulling right at 50 pounds. I pulled it to 27 a dozen times. Tiller was holding up. Everything looked really good. So I went ahead and started pulling it to 28 inches. I gave it about 15 pulls to 28 inches and then held it there to take a reading on my tiller, which continued to stay in great shape. And the weight came in at about 52 pounds at 28 inches. So what we're encountering there is some compression on these limbs as we go the additional inches there at the very end of the draw, as well as gathering up a little bit of gain in terms of draw weight as we went along. So as it stands right now, green as can be, 52 pounds at 28 inches. So you can figure just in shooting in and settling in, it's probably going to lose a couple, 2 or 3 pounds down to the 50 range. And then any peaking and tweaking that we need to do after putting in a grip and shooting it in 100, 200 shots, narrowing the tips, sanding out all of the corners and everything else, probably cost us another 3 to 5 pounds, which should put us right in that 45-pound range that we were shooting for to start with. If we're careful in all of that, we can preserve a little more weight and maybe finish out with close to a 50-pound bow. So you don't want to necessarily worry about coming in so far over your intended goal weight, but we are very comfortably within the 45 pounds at 28 inches on this particular bow. So guys, that is truthfully all there is to getting your bow tillered. I say all there is. It's not an easy process, but it can be an uncomplicated process, and that's what I was hoping to show you guys with this video today. Thanks for hanging out with me through this series, guys, and I will catch up with you guys, next week with some more videos. But as far as this one is concerned, the peaking and tweaking piece, I'll put in a card here at this point in the video where you can catch up with how I would peak and tweak this particular style of bow, as far as like putting in a grip, etc. That part at this point is all just aesthetics and final pieces of the completion of the bow. So that'll be the extent of this one, guys. So again, thanks for hanging out with me, and I will catch you next week.